hence mirror, mirror on the wall. And he starts going down this vein. And so he starts telling a certain story. I won't, for the sake of time, go into the whole story, but, as he tells a story like he does, we're all captivated. and it had to do with a mirror and what he saw in the mirror. So we're leaving that night, and I get in my truck, and it's late because, it's after preaching. And I get in my truck, you get in your truck, and I go to back up, and I look in my rearview mirror, and I look in my side mirror, and right.
All right, welcome to part number 4 on the spirit world. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk a little bit about some missionaries and some things that we have heard from missionaries on the field. Not things we've really experienced firsthand, but talk to some missionaries on the field. Although I have seen some things pretty weird that I've kind of wondered about in times past, but I'd rather not divulge them. I mean, it could have been NyQuil for all I know. So anyway, Pastor Kennedy, why don't you just share with us the night at, I think it was Buffalo Wild Wings?
Yes.
We were with Dr. Wayne Shemish, and he told us a little bit of stories about what he's experienced there in Thailand.
So we're apt to ask him these questions. I don't know how we get on the subject, but Pastor and I, we both talk about how we haven't seen actual manifestation, thank the Lord, of demonic possession or things like this. And Dr. Shemish starts talking, and he says, well, if you want to see them,
which I don't,
you need to look in a mirror. He says mirrors are where they can be found. Hence, mirror, mirror on the wall. And he starts going down this vein. And so he starts telling a certain story. I won't, for the sake of time, go into the whole story, but, as he tells a story like he does, we're all captivated. and it had to do with a mirror and what he saw in the mirror. So we're leaving that night, and I get in my truck, and it's late because, it's after preaching. And I get in my truck, you get in your truck, and I go to back up, and I look in my rearview mirror, and I look in my side mirror, and right then you texted me. And I looked at my phone, and it said, you had texted me, objects in mirror are larger than they appear. and I just, the rest of that night, I just wanted to get home. I didn't want to look at either one of those mirrors, but, to back up, I had to. So that's one of the stories that he's talked about.
Yeah, some pretty scary things and weird stuff that's taken place there. And I do remember that night. And I remember even going home and driving in my car, or going home. And, again, I'll tell you, there's times I've looked in a mirror just waking up in the morning and wondering if I'm, looks pretty scary. So,
right.
But objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. And I remember texting him that. And he tells some stories about some pretty crazy things that have taken place on the field. And some of the questions we get is, why not in America? And why is it that we don't see some of the things taking place that maybe from a biblical time frame in this dispensation?
Absolutely.
So, Pastor Kennedy, talk a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, we've both had these conversations. Being a dispensationalist that we are, we look at the Pauline epistles, and he addresses everything. He addresses marriage. He addresses things in the church, finances of the church. He addresses minute details within the church, but never one time tells us how to cast out a devil.
Correct.
How to do an exorcism. How to deal with demonic activity within the church. He deals with doctrines of devils.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
But the manifestation is what I would take to task or have a conversation with is the manifestation, like in the Gospels, the audible voice, the throwing in the fire and out of the fire aspect, is for some reason in the dispensation of the grace of God, is that in abeyance right now? Or is it, like you said, or like our missionaries say, it's because this country is raised in a Christian, and so you'll see that as pharmakeia and drugs begin to become prevalent in our society, you'll see that come back in. Or is it a veil that God is holding back for now? That would be my thought process, right?
Yeah. I think there's a dispensational element to it, of my opinion, because if Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles, and we've got 12 letters written by Paul to the church. Some say 13.
I was just going to go there.
but
Yeah.
I don't believe that, and call me hyper if you will, but because I don't believe Paul wrote Hebrews. That could be a podcast in the future. So, but having said that, it's interesting in this dispensation what you see versus what you saw in the Bible. Like, for example, you read Mark 5 and you have the maniac of Gadara.
Yes.
He's cutting himself, right? And he's breaking chains and what have you. And
Audible voices coming out.
audible voice. And my name is Legion, for we are many.
Right.
You just don't see that. Now, what's interesting, you alluded to it, is pharmakia. So if you look at the word pharmacy and you study drugs and you look at the Greek word for pharmacy or pharmakia, right? And then you look for witchcraft, really, which is the Greek word, I think it is for witchcraft, pharmakia. And you start looking at drugs and how drugs influence people. Because I've heard of people breaking handcuffs.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard of people doing some crazy stuff on drugs. And to be honest with you, you look at today, and with all the drug use becoming more and more prevalent, and with legalization of drugs, I think you're going to start seeing a little bit more demonic activity taking place today.
Yeah, sad to say, I'd agree.
I'll say lastly, before we conclude, this will be a shorter podcast here today. What advice would you give folks tuning in today? What advice would you give them when it comes to people that are claiming that they can cast out demons? And you hear on the televangelist all the time, casting out demons and casting out, communicating with demons and what have you. What advice would you give folks that get involved in that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll say what Dr. Ruckman said to one of his students who got involved in it so deep he's in prison now. Stay away from them. No, literally, if there is such thing as, and there is, but the last thing you want to do is get involved with any kind of demonic anything, whether it's good or bad. You do not want to mess with the unseen world. You just do not. He had one student apparently that had gotten so involved in it, he could name them and all of this, and next thing you know, some atrocities took place in his personal life. Dr. Ruckman said, careful, they'll attach themselves to you. Now, he's of the persuasion that they can attack your flesh, not your soul and spirit, being a child of God, but you can be influenced, as we talked about.
It's kind of semantics a little with flesh and being influenced by it. I think a Christian can be influenced by it. I don't think they can be demon possessed.
There it is. And the gentleman went to prison. Because of the acts that he did. He became so influenced. So stay away from him. Don't mess with that world.
So the conclusion of that was, don't mess with it. Pastor Blue had somebody working for him 30 years ago who got involved in it, and he was communicating with them. He, had names for them, and just went off the deep end. And he was in the ministry. He ended up going in the ministry, but off the deep end. And so, flee from all appearances of evil. Why should we be enamored with darkness anyway? I'd rather communicate with God than communicate with demons. And so why don't we just focus on that?
Yes, amen.
And not mess with it, because there is some scary stuff.
Absolutely.
That's out there, and I think people need to guard against it and be very careful. So this is going to conclude part number 4 on the spirit world. I want to say thank you for tuning in. I encourage you, if you would, shoot us in the comment section suggestions for future podcasts as we go into 2022. Suggestions of ones you'd like done, comments, maybe questions you have for Dr. Kennedy on the spirit world and things that we've talked about. He did answer some very tough questions, I will say that. And we've enjoyed this so much. I hope you have as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and Merry Christmas.